Hey there, I'm Amy Nilsson with Big Abilities and Collaborative Corner for Exceptional Children. I know a lot of families right now are under a tremendous amount of stress, and with the pandemic and a lot of people working from home while looking after their kids, preparing to either homeschool or distance learn in the next couple of weeks. And some of you have chosen to send your kids back to a campus, and that in itself brings a tremendous amount of stress. So what I want to do today is give you 3 parenting strategies that will help your day run a little more smoothly and help transitions with your child be a little more effective. And I know that will ease some of the burden of the stress that's going on in your life. Stay tuned to the end, and I have a bonus tip. So let's get started. So before I get into explaining what these 3 strategies are, I first want to talk to you a little bit about behavior and transitions. And if you're watching this, you probably have a child either on the autism spectrum or with some sort of a developmental disability. I do. My son is 5 and he has autism spectrum disorder, and we use the strategies that I'm going to teach you today all day throughout our day. But they really will work with most kids. As a matter of fact, I wish I'd known this stuff when I was raising my other 3, but I've learned these strategies through most of my son's behavior therapist. So when talking about behavior with a child, what we want to do is increase compliance, because compliance means they're doing what we've asked. So these strategies will increase compliance, them doing what you ask, and decrease non-compliance, which is them not doing what you've asked. So that's what those terminology mean, and you'll hear me use those probably throughout the descriptions of these strategies. Now, anytime you're giving your child a request, something that you want them to do, whether that's leave watching TV to go to the dinner table, or whether that's transition from free time back into our homework, whatever that may be, there's a few things to keep in mind first. So before we get to the strategies, these are some things to keep in mind first. When you give a child a direction, you want to make it clear and concise. And so rather than multi-steps, so rather than I need you to turn off the TV and use the bathroom and wash your hands and come to the dinner table, you may say something like, I need you to turn off the TV. Very simple and concise, one step. And if your child's older, sometimes you can add in a second step, but keep it very simple. Another important thing to do, and I've been guilty of this myself, is you want to be in close proximity to your child when you give them a request. So rather than you're at the kitchen finishing up dinner and they're in the living room and hey, come to the table, that's really not effective, because you have to break their concentration in order for them to understand what you're asking them to do. So stop what you're doing, walk over to your child, make eye contact them with you if you can, get them to stop looking at the iPad or put down their crayon or whatever it is they're doing, and then give them that single step, very concise direction. And the third piece to this is, if your child can, ask them to repeat the request back to you. So I do this with my son all the time. I'll tell him, I'll get in his face and say, okay, it's time for you to wash your hands. What does mommy want you to do? And then he'll repeat back, wash my hands. So that's important to use for all 3 of these strategies. Now, let's get into the strategies. The first one is tell, don't ask. And I'll give you an explanation about this one and why it's so important. If you have a child on the autism spectrum, you understand that they are very literal, and rhetorical questions are kind of challenging and difficult for them. So a rhetorical question would be like, hey, are you ready to eat? And that means there's an option to say no. So you probably really mean it's time to eat. But sometimes we feel like it sounds more polite to ask someone a question rather than to give them a demand. But with some of our kiddos on the autism spectrum, they need to be told directly, because if you ask them that question, they think there's the option to say no. For example, my son was in swim lessons about a year ago, and the swim instructor was very nice and sweet, and she'd come over and she'd be like, are you ready to get in the pool? And he wouldn't be ready. So I had to kind of instruct her, when you're ready for him to do something, you need to tell him what to do, don't ask him. So that's the first strategy, is tell, don't ask. So before you give your child a rhetorical question, are you ready for your bath? stop a minute and rethink that and rephrase that into a very concise, simple statement, again, that you're giving them in close proximity. So the second strategy is one of my favorites, and that is choices. Now, anytime you want your child to do something that they don't want to do, if you can give them choices, that compliance is going to go up. For example, there was a time that my son really struggled with not wanting to brush his teeth. Probably that's a familiar challenge for some of you as well. So what I did was purchase toothbrushes of his favorite characters. And so when it was time for teeth brushing, it wasn't, are you ready to brush your teeth? It was, we're going to brush your teeth. Do you want to use the Buzz Lightyear toothbrush or the PJ Masks toothbrush? And then at that point, it kind of retrains their brain to realize I'm not getting an option of the activity, but I get two highly motivating things for me. So think about areas that you may struggle with your child getting them to do and how you could give them some choices. Another example would be, for a long time, my son struggled with not enjoying story time at all. And I'm going to be doing distance learning with him, so there is going to be some reading. So things like, it's reading time. Do you want to read Green Eggs and Ham or The Cat in the Hat? And as simple as that strategy is, I promise you it works. And I just second nature now give him a choice on most everything that I can. It's bath time. Which pajamas do you want to wear? PJ Masks or Star Wars? And it's just kind of second nature to me now. One thing to caution, and I tell people this story a lot about the pajamas. I was at a friend's house pre-pandemic, and her son, she was trying to use choices to encourage him to take a bath or a shower. And so she asked him to pick out his pajamas, and she opens up the drawer and there's 800 pairs of pajamas in there. That's not an effective use of choice. So you want to keep the choices very limited, just to 2 or 3. If you're just going to start using this strategy, keep it to 2, and then you can gradually increase to 3. But the more options, the more difficult it is for them to make a very quick decision. So keep the choices limited. And the final strategy, and this is probably my favorite, is first then. In the behavioral therapy world, that's called the PREMAC principle. And what first then is you pair what you want the child to do first, and then what they want to do next. So here are 2 examples of some first then charts. We used to use the visuals with my son, but I've been using these strategies for well over 2 years, and so verbally now he can make those decisions and understand what's going to happen. Now, this is using something called Board Maker, and to me these pictures are so abstract that my son couldn't really understand that this was a person and this is snack time, but he doesn't eat these things. So what I would always do would be realistic pictures of what he uses. And so one of the first then boards we used to use on a daily basis, he was a late potty trainer, and some of our children with developmental disabilities are, and he also didn't like to have his diaper changed. So I had a picture of him on the change table holding a diaper, and then I had a picture of his iPad. And so each time he would have a diaper change, he'd get that iPad for a few minutes. So the then needs to be highly motivating. So if you're going to be homeschooling your child and there's something about the school day they're not particularly excited about. For my son, fine motor skills he does not really enjoy doing because it's tough for him. But if I put the fine motor activity first, and then I put a picture of his playground, so we're going to do some gross motor, some recess after, then that motivation is built in. I caution you not to reverse the order. And as a parent of 3 neurotypical children before my little guy with ASD was born, that's what I used a lot. And something like, you can watch your movie, but then you have to clean your room. And a lot of times that's because the child has negotiated with you. You've told them to clean their room, and they've like, I want to watch this movie first. And so, to eliminate some of the arguing between parent and child, you agree to let them have what they want first. Well, with our little kiddos on the spectrum, that's just not an effective strategy. And consistency is very important. My son he never questions anymore if what I want to do first. He doesn't try to negotiate that he wants what he wants first. He knows that he has to give mom what she wants first, and then he gets what he wants. So that's a great, great, great strategy. Either one of these to use with your kiddos. Now, the bonus tip that I want to share with you. So let's first recap the 3 that I shared. The tell, don't ask, giving choices, and first then. So the last tip, and I call this a tip because it's more of a, you can use it with all of those strategies. And I'm going to link a blog that I wrote in the show notes about this particular tip because there's so much here that I'm not going to have time to go through it all with you, but I do want to get the main message across, and that's using timers. So your biggest, and I'm looking for my phone here, your best resource for transitions is your phone, and it is not handing it to them to let them play an app. It is using the timer. Now, I found this strategy through my son's therapist. So she was working with him at home one day, and in addition to autism spectrum disorder, he has pretty profound ADHD, and so getting him to do something for an extended period of time is challenging. And so what the ABA therapist would do was she would set a timer for 5 minutes. So he would work for 5 minutes, and then he would get a 10-minute break. And that worked beautifully, to the point where eventually it was work 6 minutes and you get a 9-minute break, and kind of slowly they switch that where he works 10 minutes and then gets a 5-minute break. He would work for that. And so timers can be used with every strategy. They can be used with every transition throughout your day. And here are some things to keep in mind when you use a timer with your child is that have them set it, because you want them to feel like this is part of what they're choosing to do. So you say, okay, you can first finish your dinner and then we're going to go take a shower. And then however many minutes that you're going to give them to transition. And I don't recommend making it too long, because they need to have quickly in the back of their mind, they know that something's coming, but you want the timer to be long enough that they do get a chance to finish up what they're doing. So we typically use 2 minutes. So I'll say, okay, in 2 minutes you have to take a shower, set the timer, have them touch it, the start button, put it where they can see, and then as the timer's going, after about every 30 seconds, maybe do a reminder. Oh, you've got 1 minute and 30 seconds left. And if your child doesn't understand the concept of time right now, they will learn it through using this timer. My son did not understand the concept of time, and now he's gotten so much better at it. As a matter of fact, when he gets home from ABA therapy, my husband's working from home, and he still usually has a couple of hours of work left, and my son wants to play with his dad, and he'll say, "How much time, Dad?" And so my husband will say, "I need to work another hour, another 2 hours," and whatever it is, Barkley now at 5 can grab the iPhone and set the timer, and he'll set it by my husband's office door, and he'll periodically go watch it. And another reason that timers work with our kids is there's also that auditory piece, because you hear that timer go off and it's a reminder. So when I'm using timers with my son, let's say it's for a transition to the shower, which is a big one, he'll be on his iPad or doing whatever he's doing, and once we've agreed that 2 minutes and he's set it and he's looking at it from time to time, when he hears that alarm, he'll shut that iPad off or whatever and walk to the bathroom. I mean, it is miraculous how well using a timer will work if you use it consistently. And so I'll link this blog. I'm also going to link another one that I did about our morning routine and how important timers are for that morning routine, because morning routines typically are time dependent. You got to get out the door at a certain time, and so you don't really have a lot of time to just meander about in the morning and take your time eating breakfast and getting dressed. And so a timer is a really good thing to make sure you meet those time sensitive deadlines of getting out the door so people can get where they need to go. So that's a lot of information I've shared with you today, but they're very simple strategies to implement. And I will link as much of this information in the show notes for you as I can. I hope these strategies were helpful to you. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And please feel free to reach out to me at bigabilities.com if you have any questions. Thank you.